So hello all, welcome to the second day of this training. It's good to see all the people present over here. So I've just shared my screen and please let me know if you're unable to view it, basically. So I'll just share the agenda for today's session. Okay, so today's session is about getting around the integration designer for developing the iFlows, wherein we'll have the canvas with iFlow introduction, the senders, the receivers, maybe going into a bit of the details on each and every part that we discussed yesterday. So before I begin, I just wanted to check with you in case if you have any of the questions that might have popped later during your time, which you would like to clarify before we begin this session, or is it okay if I just proceed with this one? Any kind of questions, queries, anything? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So we have, okay, I'll quickly move on to the Eclipse screen then. So we'll just look at a sample project structure, how what are the different components. Maybe I can walk you through the palette and familiarize you with the different tools that we have in HCI for designing the integration flow, also known as the iFlow. So, okay. So the basic screen of Eclipse we took a look at yesterday. So over here, there are a few different windows which we have. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that I have worked on Eclipse only for HCI. So I'm not sure whether this basic view exists for all the other project developments as well. But I would just quickly walk through these windows. So on the left-hand side pane, the one that I'm hovering on, we have all the resources related to the iFlows, the projects that you have built. So this is the Project Explorer or our workspace. So whatever we build, all the integration artifacts get compiled under one of the project folders, which we can then refer to in our iFlow or make changes directly from the left-hand side tree structure. Just below that, we have the Node Explorer. The Node Explorer, as I mentioned yesterday, it has your tenant, then it has your tenant management node and the IFL map node. So it basically tells you about the tenant that you have currently subscribed through the login credentials that you have entered in the operations server window, as we did yesterday under preferences. So you connect to an operations server and the tenant reflects over here. Then just next to it are different types of tabular views, which are used for our development, our error resolution, and our basically the compilation errors if we have any, or in case if you wish to set the properties of any of the items in the canvas. So the canvas is over here, wherein we have all the different items related to the iFlow. And if you wish to set any of the properties for them, like for example, if you have a router shape and you wish to set the properties, it would be shown up in the properties tab. So that being said, we also have a few different tabs over here, which we will cover as we go along and we develop a sample iFlow. Just to send an email based on the processing, we'll try and trigger a web service from SOAP UI, and we'll send across an email to, let's say, me, and we can see that sample flow once today. Okay, so this gives you the component status view. Then you have the tasks view in case if there are any of the tasks running on the tenant. Then the problems, if any, with your artifact that you might wish to deploy on the tenant. Then you have the console, which gives you all the different activities that the tenant is performing. As soon as you interact or if you try to execute checks, you click on save. it executes checks in the background, and that gives you, the console gives you the steps that the tenant is performing. Then you have, last but not the least, is the externalized parameters. So that also we'll cover up as we move along. Externalized parameters, as we saw in the SAP standard iFlow, these are the parameters that you can configure on the configure screen in the web UI. So it is made available to the end users for the iFlow, and they can change them before deploying. They can enter the filter values or any of the values that you wish them, which you can utilize in the iFlow. Then on the right hand side over here, we have the palette. So this palette is the place, it is kind of like all the tool store. It stores all the tools which you can use in the iFlow. So we have connectors which give you the sequence flow, the message flow, though we very rarely we use this, because we just drag, once you hover on top of the shape, it gives you create connection over here. So we can directly create a connection from there. And the second push drop-down menu is others, which are parts of the iFlow, which may not be utilized within the integration process, but they are the surrounding artifacts of this iFlow. Like you have an exception subprocess. That exception subprocesses, for example, if you have any kind of technical error wherein you received an exception, a Java exception, maybe the XML wasn't correctly formed, or you were trying to perform an operation which led into an unstable state of system. So you can capture all the exceptions in your exception subprocess process that you have over here, and you can throw your custom error messages so that the process never fails in HCI. Instead, it is the error is returned to the calling application stating that, or an email is sent to any of the admin teams stating that your exception was ended abruptly or something like that. Then the second is integration process, like the one I dragged yesterday. So this integration process is nothing but a local subprocess which can act as a reiterative unit of processing in your iFlow. Then apart from integration process, we have sender, receiver. We have both of them over here as of now. And the last one is the local integration process. So local integration process, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. I confused integration process with local integration. So integration process is the main integration process that we have over here in the palette. In case by any chance you mistakenly, let's say, delete it, so you can go ahead and create another one, drag in another integration process, and you can create the start and end shapes. Local integration process, this is the actual local sub-process, which can be deemed as an iterative unit, which you want to call a particular functionality that you would like to call multiple times. So you can have the design over here, and you can give a call in your integration process. Was there chat? Okay.
Aditya?
Yes, Prakash. Yes, Prakash.
Can I just quickly, seek clarifications from you based on your experience with regards to this sub-process thing. I remember in the last Open SAP training that I attended, I posed the same question to the trainer or to the SAP team as to, a potential cyclical or infinite scenario that can surface, between the main process and the local integration process, or the sub process, as the case may be. So we went back and forth because I know, in other ESB tools, there's always a way for you to break the, the infinite scenario, if you were to occur, even right from the design stage. If you're using Spring, for instance, Spring frameworks to do your ESB, to implement your ESB. Okay, there's always a way that Spring will tell you immediately that, okay, you have a potential situation for an infinite or cyclical. But in this scenario, the feedback I got from the SCP team was that there was no way to actually prevent that scenario, that they were going to, possibly look at, how to prevent that, in the next release of the HCI. But I don't know, maybe from your experience, how often you've used, the sub processes, and maybe if you can share with us, how you'll be able to prevent a cyclical call between, the main process, the sub process, a sub process calling another sub process, and the sub process, the internal sub process calling, the previous sub process. So you have an infinite scenario.
Yes, Bakao, I do understand your question, but actually in iFlow, we don't have a concept of loop. So you're not looping at one particular thing, which leads into an infinite loop kind of a scenario. So for example, how would I say that this end shape will never connect to the router, or let's say you had any other, I'll just quickly drag another shape.
Okay, so Anita, let me just quickly clarify what I was saying. Supposing you have two sub-processes here, okay? I mean, you have two sub-processes. There's no way, if you have two sub-processes, there's no way to tell sub-process B not to call sub-process A, or sub-process A not calling sub-process B. I mean, I don't know whether you get my point now. You have two sub-processes, or let's say, three sub-processes. Sub-process A calls sub-process B, sub-process B calls sub-process C, while sub-process C in turn calls sub-process A. Okay, I don't know whether that makes some technical sense. I mean, it's just a pointer that you can point that over.
No, absolutely it does. But Bakao, in that particular case, you'll have to take care of this scenario during the design phase itself, because these integration processes, whether it be local or the main process, everything has a definitive flow. So in case, let's say, for example, you have this subprocess A calling subprocess B, which at a particular, just before the end event, gives a call back to the subprocess A. Mm-hmm. So there has to be some business reason behind that call. You either need to have a router shape which defines, stating that if the call is coming from subprocess B, then you need to go to X route. Otherwise, you proceed with the normal route that you are taking. So that kind of a business logic we will definitely have to avoid these kind of situations wherein you have multiple sub-processes calling each other. We have had these scenarios wherein we have had three sub-processes of different how do I say, functionalities inbuilt in them, but we always used to have a router shape at the beginning itself, which routes the message based on the data that is coming, because we know that we need to process it differently. That is why we have built three sub-processes. So that call logic needs to be based on a router shape, or maybe in case if you are parallelly pushing the same data onto all the branches and you wish to get the data modified into different formats, that also is possible. But again, I mean, as I mentioned, you need to have some conditional routing over there. Otherwise, I'm not sure whether it works that way. It goes into an infinite loop. I'm not sure. I've never tried that and never encountered that kind of a scenario.
Okay, thank you.
But I do get your question, right? Okay, so moving on, we have the third tab in the palette as the process call. So this process call is used in any of the places to give a call to any of the local integration processes. So as soon as you pull the process call, you can right click and you can click the assign local integration process, and it will be assigned based on whichever process you wish to call. And the next one is the service call, which again is the service call is an important call that we mostly use, because this is used to fetch the data from different systems or post and send the data to different systems. So a request reply call is, as the name suggests, it is kind of a synchronous call, and it expects a reply every time that you are using this, but it also depends upon the use case. So let's say, for example, if you are having just an HTTP post call which is an asynchronous call and it won't give you any kind of a reply. So instead of having any of the post-processing shapes after the request reply, you can directly move it onto the end event. So that means it simply shows the other person that you are not expecting any reply from this request reply shape, and you are just sending across an email, or maybe you're just sending across an HTTP post call or anything. So if you are not concerned about the response, just send it to an end event, and this works absolutely fine. Then we have different events in the HCI iFlow scenarios. We have the start message. Any particular integration flow at any given point in time cannot have multiple start events. As soon as you put another start event, it gives you an error stating that you cannot have multiple start events in an iFlow. So as I mentioned earlier in yesterday's call, that the trigger mechanism is always one, but you can have different request replies to fetch the data from multiple sources to enrich the data on the go. But the trigger point has to be one, either a web service call or a scheduled timer call. Then the second shape is the end message. This can be used n number of times. This basically symbolizes that whichever message was flowing through this route will end at this particular point. After end event, you can only have a connector call, which posts the data to a mail receiver or which posts to an HTTP post scenario. So end event, after that, you can only send it to a logical system, but the iFlow processing is deemed completed when the message flow reaches the end event. So wherever you connect the end event to, it will automatically assume that the message processing has stopped over here. Then you again have terminate message. This is one of the shapes that confuses a lot of people. This is primarily used in very specific business scenarios, wherein, let's take an example of, let's say you're doing a user upsert. In case if you have any questions, please stop me in between. So I'm just taking a generic scenario wherein you have a user upsert. So you are trying to create an employee into the SuccessFactors system. So you have a set of API calls to make. And those API calls would be the mandatory portlets that you supply for an employee information, like the user API. Then you have the per person API, and then the per personal API. So if we are having these three calls, they need to be in a particular sequence. So when we have a sequence, we usually use another shape, which is a multicast. So it is nothing but you send the same payload onto three different branches. So the first branch result gives you a clarity whether the second branch should be executed or not. So in those kind of scenarios, wherever you have, let's say the router shape, if I'm checking, for example, this is the response from the first API call. I check whether the API call was successful. If yes, go ahead with the second call. Otherwise, I put a default route which says that this is not successful. So I'll just select this default and I'll terminate the message. So as soon as I terminate the message, the system, the HCI system, raises an exception message stating that the conditional router did not find a route to pass the message onto, and thus the message was terminated explicitly. So it is as good as if anybody has worked with ABAP, we have a trigger exception, like you can pass on message type X, which throws an ABAP dump. So on the same lines over here, we have triggering an exception. You can use it with route shapes. So this is one of the shapes that I have used it with, but I'm not sure of any of the other use cases for this particular terminate message. Sorry. So any questions on this terminate message? Any kind of clarity you might need? I can take another example if you would like.
Yeah, Aditya, Rajdeep.
Yes, Rashi, please go ahead.
A quick one, please. This message can this be customized based on customer need? Or
Uh,
is it just for the system to understand that something has went wrong, and then we can go and
Yes,
change the content?
absolutely. So, Rajdeep, as I mentioned, that you also have in the others, you have the exception sub
Yeah.
process. So
Mm-hmm.
you can have an exception sub process, which will
Mm-hmm.
catch the exception which is thrown by this.
Yeah.
It will catch the exception, and you can mention over there that maybe some uh, unidentified response was received from the caller or something like that.
Yeah. So, and
That
that
would
will come
make
up as a XML or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that is up to us. You can create it like an XML. You can send across an email. From exception sub process also, you can do all the things that you can do in the main integration process.
Okay. Yeah.
So that is possible.
Thank
But
you.
terminate message, I'm not sure on much of the use cases for it. But we usually use it as if you have used the case and switch case kind of scenarios. So we always have a default thing.
Yes. Yes.
Over here also, we also always will have a default thing which leads on to a terminate message. So that if any kind of response which is not expected by the system, you can directly terminate it. Let's say, for example, you do not want to raise an exception. You want to just end the message. Okay, if the response is neither success nor failure, then just
Something like
move it on to an end event.
Yeah.
So that way it won't throw an exception.
Yeah. Something like exit 0 in Java. Yeah.
Absolutely. Exit 0. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, sure. So this is one of the use cases that I came across for the terminate message, but I wasn't sure because unlike in Boomi, in HCI, if you have multiple branches of a message flow, so let's say the properties that you set in the first branch would not be available in the second branch for your processing. So you cannot have a scenario like you have the 3 different API calls. First is the user API call. So you divide them into 3 branches, and the response, you try to set it up in a property so that you can check it in the second branch. That is not possible over here in HCI. So either you'll have to use a data store, which we'll come across in a moment, or else you have other options. Maybe the Java experts would be able to understand it better, that we have some Java objects which we can create on the root level. I'm not sure how to use it in the Eclipse projects, but that has been one of the methods suggested by SAP. So we usually go ahead with using a sequential flow, or else just go ahead and write it to a data store, which you can later fetch from, and you can process the response. Okay. So then we have the next shape over here in events is the timer start. So this is the same timer start that we discussed when we were seeing the iFlow for the SAP employee replication. So it also has the same properties which are configurable through the schedule. You can run it once, you can run it on date, daily, weekly. This is the timer properties. Then you have error start. So error start is usually used in the exception subprocess. It always gives you an error start. So error start means that you are trying to catch an exception over here, or any of the errors that the iFlow might have thrown. Because in HCI, we don't have a placeholder to throw explicit errors at points. So that is the reason maybe this terminate shape has been provided, so that you can pass it as an exception onto the exception subprocess, which is a local subprocess. And that will always start with error. So you cannot have an error start in any of the shapes, but you can only have it in an exception subprocess. Then you have the next event as error end. So for example, in case if you do not want to, whenever you have an exception subprocess, since you are catching the error, the iFlow status will always show as completed. It won't show you that there was an exception and you did capture it, but it wasn't failed. It was completed successfully because you have caught the error and you processed it. So in case if you wish to still show the error shape, the iFlow in a failed status, then instead of making use of end event, you can make use of error end inside an exception subprocess. So like, for example, if I put it over here, you see this is the end event 6 automatically configured, because system assumes that you would be handling all the errors that you encounter in this particular exception subprocess. So it gives you an end event. So instead of that, you can directly go ahead and drag the error end over here. And that will return your process state to failed instead of completed. Sorry. Then the last one is escalation end, which we have. Escalation end is basically whenever we have the terminated shape. So that time it ends with an escalation event. So if you want to, let's say some team is, whoever is responsible for monitoring the HCI processes, if you wish to notify them that there has been an error because of XYZ reasons, so you can pass the message flow onto an escalation event. This has just been mentioned by SAP, but I haven't found any of the use cases for this escalation event. We have never used it as of now, but I'm sure there would be a pretty good reason for this escalation event to be provided in this palette. So this escalation event, basically it does nothing. Instead of completed and failed, it just shows the process status as escalated. So that means there might be some kind of an error and some team should look into it.
Okay, question, Aditya?
Yes,
two questions, okay. First one, I'm just curious to know, at each of these, nodes or points, along on the design on the canvas, what's the position of the message, the payload itself? Is it available, at each point, or it's just when you're about to do the mapping, that's when you have access to the full payload? I mean, just out of curiosity, that's question one. The question two is, I noticed now that we're working with Eclipse, whereas, the stuff that we did yesterday, we're using the web UI, is it that, we get more, the Eclipse environment confers more advantages compared to the web UI environment?
Yep.
I mean, some of these questions, we kind of pass them across to, the SAP guys, during the training, and some of them, the answers were not really, plausible, kind of, they were not very cogent. But you being an experienced, developer in HCI, I mean, maybe you could just shed some light.
Yeah, sure, Bakal. So coming to your question one, yes, the payload is available at any given point during that iFlow execution. So if you have, let's say, the start shape, when you come to router, the payload is available to you. So if somebody, let's say there's a fully built process over here and you wish to change the payload by putting in a mapping at any point in time, you can do that. Or otherwise you can put in a script, you can put in conditional routing. So basically the payload is available to you at every point. And for your second question, actually, it is in the roadmap for SAP that they would be moving all the development artifacts onto the web UI. But as of now, web UI does not support a lot of shapes that are supported by Eclipse. So that is the reason over there you have access to very basic shapes. Like, for example, if you have a content modifier, which we'll be discussing in detail, so you can change the properties of content modifier. And I've never tried it, but I think router conditions you can change, but you cannot add a new route to the router. So you cannot do this. And a lot of other shapes are not at all accessible. They are read-only in the web UI. So all the development that we do it in Eclipse, and then we upload it to web UI as a central data repository for
deployment. Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay. And last two events, the start and the end event, these are basically used in the local integration processes. So you can even have an end message over here, but usually whenever you make use of end event, it, let's say for example, if you had a router over here and you have one branch going on to end event 2, the other branch going on to end event 9. So whichever branch has the message payload which is reaching the end event, that would be returned to the calling process. So basically it is to kind of like return the value whichever you have executed in your local integration process onto the calling process or the main process, whichever has called this. If you put an end message over here, it just ends the message then and there itself. It will never return it to any of the main processes. So that is the difference that we have between these end event and end message. But as you see, even the end message comes in as end event. So this was, again, as I told you, this has been told by SAP. I never found a use case wherein I would like to end a message within the local integration process. I would always like to have the response to my calling process and make decision over there, whether I wish to carry it forward or I wish to conditionally end it by notifying an error or something. So most of these things may not have a use case as of now, but as the requirements in HCI build up, maybe we can come up with new possible solution by using these shapes in the design. So they may be there for a very good reason, but as of now, I'm not aware of that reason. Okay. Then we have another shape as XML validator. In case if you would like to validate the XML based on one of the XML schemas that you have. So primarily, you can have checks like length validations or data type validations. Let's say, for example, if you are upserting into success factors and the user ID in your success factors is configured as an integer instead of a string. So in that, or maybe user ID is a bad example. Maybe any other field that you created custom accepts only the integer values. So you might want to validate it over here itself. Instead of writing a script, we can directly use an XML schema over here. You can browse through it, get the XML schema from your artifacts, and then it also gives you an option of preventing exception on failure. So in case if anything fails, the processing is continued, but it doesn't throw an exception over here. So that is up to you if you wish to prevent the exception or you wish to maybe just notify the exception, catch it in your exception subprocess, and notify it to the relevant team or the owners of that iFlow. Then the next are a few of the security elements. So here we have content decryptor. The decryptor actually is currently, I think it is only for PGP encryption and decryption. Again, I haven't seen any other use case for this. Yep, I think that is the case. Yeah. And for this, in case if you have, I'm sorry, in case if you want to use any of the PGP certificates to encrypt or decrypt the data, you need to contact SAP to install it on the tenant, which this particular encryptor or decryptor will take the, how do I say? I mean, it will take that particular certificate to encrypt or decrypt it. So the trust store, that connection is not visible to us. Maybe they are coming up with different enhancements to this. But as of now, it is not available to us. We need to request SAP to install it. Okay. Then the next one we have is the signature verifier. So as I mentioned earlier also that we can have different certificates, and we can try, instead of a certificate authentication at the very beginning of the process, maybe during the process when you are trying to do a request reply, trying to get a file to enrich the data, you may want the signature verifier to verify whether the signatures are correct in the file or not. Sorry. Then the next one is message signer. In case if you would like to, again, you would like to have a request reply shape wherein you are passing a file onto an SFTP server in between the processing, and you wish to sign that message so that it is encrypted and secure at the receiver's end. You can use the message signer to do that, and it gives us different mechanisms or different options to sign the message. And you can even include the certificates, whichever you would like, and also the timestamp, the algorithm, whichever you would like. There are multiple options available over here. And then you have the private key alias. So you can mention any value over there as provided to you. And the last is the content encryptor, which, as I mentioned, it again works on the same encryption based on the certificate that you would have loaded. Okay. Okay, this seems to be a more updated version. I've never seen these many options, but maybe they might have released some update on this particular message encryptor and decryptor. Because earlier it was only PGP. So now they have provided us with different options. Okay. Going on to the next, which is the message transformers, the most used tab in the iFlows. So I'll just get rid of these different shapes that we have. Okay. Now the first message transformer shape we have is mapping. As I mentioned yesterday, that in HCI, everything is dealt in XML only, like PI. So whichever is the message coming in, as soon as it reaches the processing stages, it has to be converted into XML. Unless you have a script written to parse the string data and maybe modify it or validate it or transform it according to your requirements. So the mapping, again, it supports only the XML mappings. You can either create a normal graphical mapping, I'm sorry. You can create a graphical mapping over here, or you can create an XSL mapping. So it gives you the tools. It gives you the tools for creating the graphical mapping, of course. So like MM test. You can select the source element and you can select the target element, and under definition tab, you can have a graphical kind of a mapping, drag and drop. And you can even write your own custom UDFs or your own custom mapping functions like we do in PI. So in case if there is any requirement which is not sufficed by the already existing standard shapes, you can write your own custom script in Groovy to parse the or to process the incoming elements and produce an output out of it. So that is also available over here. UDF is supported. XSLT, again, I mean, XSLT, I don't think I need any explanation on, or I need not give any explanation on. It is the XSL transformation that we can do. And we can assign the mapping steps over there. So mostly XSL transformations we have done for removing the root nodes, or else adding different nodes to at the very end. For example, creating a dummy record to identify that the message will end at this particular route or this particular record. Then also XSL mappings can be used for transforming your incoming payload into a CSV format, though we do have already XML to CSV converter for that, but still at many times that doesn't fit the bill. So we have used the XSL mapping for those kind of cases. And the most primary use is to convert the complex noded structure into a linear structure at the target. so that it's easier for processing in HCI. That is another use case. Then we have a decoder. It gives you zip and base64 encoding and decoding parts. This is for many of the applications, like I've worked with Ariba integration. So in Ariba, there's a custom web service which can be made available, and the customers can design their processes against it. So whatever is the file format that it sends as an attachment, which is encoded and zipped, a CSV format, which is encoded into base64 encoding, and then it is zipped into a zip file, and it is sent as a character string to us. So in those kind of cases, we may make use of decoding the messages based on our requirement. Then we have content modifier. This is again a very widely used shape. In Boomi, an equivalent shape is when we have set properties shape is one of the shape which we can use. And it is a combination of set properties and message shape in Boomi. So in this content modifier, we can set the headers, we can set properties, set or delete properties. And the third is that we can modify the incoming payload or the message body that is coming to this particular shape. If you would like, you can modify it. Otherwise, you can, let's say the body coming in is the employee data, and you need the next body from this shape onwards to be passed on as the employee emergency contact details for your further processing. So you can change the body over here, and you can mention the details. I mean, you can refer to properties in here. You can call properties. You can create your own custom XML structure, like XML1. So whatever you write here is would be carried forward. So this is the functionality which is offered in Boomi by a message shape, and the property and the headers are the set properties shape in Boomi that we have. Now this header plays an important part. For example, if you're calling any HTTP service which requires some headers to be set, this is a limitation which I found that it was pretty difficult for us to handle in Boomi back in 2014. But I'm not sure whether they have come up with setting the headers as a different step now. But earlier we used to compile our own message and put it in a message shape and then send it across to the HTTP connector. So complete the whole SOAP message part along with the SOAP header and SOAP body with the payload. So here what we can do is we can just set the headers over here. For example, the most commonly used is the content type. We can, sorry. So we can enter something like this. So this header would be carried all the way along with the body to the next shape. Let it be a request reply or let it be any kind of mapping or anything. Okay. And this is one of the shapes that we use a lot, basically, this content modifier. We make use of it a lot to set the properties for using it in different places. For example, let's say you have the employee data coming in. You have, you want to enrich the data with multiple sources, for example. So you have the employee data coming in, which has pick list values. And these pick list values can be n number in the source data. So if you wish to enrich each and every field, you cannot make use of content enricher. Once we come to that, I'll explain why. So instead of that, what we do is we just use the content modifier. We take the property, we create a property over here. So I'll create something like incoming body of the type expression, and you can give the value as, this is the way that you access the incoming body of the payload. It is $, then you have the curly brackets start, in.body, and the curly brackets end. So this expression gives you the current body that is coming in for the message. So we create a property out of it. And then here I'll just say, oops, sorry. Here I'll just say, do not do anything. I'm not sure what is happening. Okay. And after this, we will give a call to the picklist query, take its body, and then call a script to read both the properties and then parse the XML in the script itself. So these kind of scenarios we have used in the past a lot of times, because instead of giving a call for each and every pick list, it's always better to have just one pick list call to success factors, get all the values from success factors, and take your incoming body and loop through it and replace the pick list values wherever you would like. Any questions on this part?
Yeah, I've got a question. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think for each of the shapes that you have in the flow, you know, there's this feature we have in the PR environment. We call it display queue. Okay, it actually helps you a lot in seeing the current context of the queue, so that you know, I don't know whether we have something like that. Maybe, you know, if you've done some modification, maybe you use the content modifier. Okay, you want to see the current context of the message, the current state of the message. You know, is there any way you can do that here apart from just putting in the store?
No, Bakao, we cannot do anything like that over here. The only way we can do it is that there's something known as message processing log,
Okay.
which we usually look through to find any kind of errors with our iFlow once the message has been processed.
Okay.
So that is how we surface the errors in HCI. Like in Boomi, you have the process logs for each and every process. Here we also have message process logs. All you can do is you can notify the body over there. So it shows up in the process logs.
You said notify?
Yeah. So notify is, again, it has to be done by script only.
Okay.
And also content modifier, definitely, whenever you change the body, it logs it in the message processing log.
Okay.
But the thing is, whenever you have these kind of, let's say, for example, I'll just take this. As I mentioned, that now I would like to have the picklist body going outside. So how do I, the way that I take values from any of the property is this way: $, then again the curly brackets, property dot, then the property name without any quotes or anything. So you have $p underscore picklist. So this way, now after this particular content modifier shape, the picklist body would be carried forward to the next shape. But when we see in the message processing log, it only says set body $property dot p picklist.
Mm-hmm.
So it won't log the actual contents of the body. It only logs that what you have set it to right now.
Okay.
I have set it to a property. So it will just log that you have set it to a property.
So it doesn't show you the content itself, you know. So you can see, you know, maybe during troubleshooting to see what's currently set into it.
Actually, it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
That is why we have the tracing functionality in HCI. So
Okay.
you can trace on the whole iFlow. Now that trace functionality, again, it takes a lot of toll on the tenant. So that is the reason I mentioned yesterday as well, that SAP doesn't enable it a lot. Sorry. Okay. So this content modifier has a lot of use cases. I mean, you can use it for n number of things. Like headers, I have made use of a lot in when we are integrating with LMS system, because it requires the authorization value, it requires the content type. We need to change it to application/JSON. So these are a few of the things that we need to look at. And also, in case if you're giving a call to any of the systems which requires the CORS, I think it is cross origin something header that you need to pass. So in that case also, it is a very valuable thing that we can set headers over here. Second one, property. I described one of the use cases for you, but these properties can be referred in for routing the messages also. So let's say you have 10 different messages. You can route them based on the properties that you set before the router shape. So properties are very valuable in that. Also, you can log the payload into a property, retrieve it later in your script or anywhere else for your viewing purposes. You can also refer to a property in a mapping. So while you are mapping, you can also pull in a property over there and get the transformations according to that. Body, as I mentioned, again, I mean, body is very widely used because this is a way of, for example, you have, let's say, one of the output of your whole iFlow gives you just a root node and a linear structure, and you wish to combine 10 of these. So you can always add a root node on top of the actual root node which is coming. Something like records XYZ. Then on top of that, you can have record set, create, and then pass on the incoming body. So something like this. So capturing the whole payload into a record set. And this is again used a lot of times in our iFlow developments, that you need to have the body inside another XML structure, or you may want to combine two different sets of XML structures under one root node, something like property.p_picklist. So that actually enables you to modify the body according to your requirements. So content modifier is very widely used, and we have been also using them pretty generously. Then the next shape we have is converter. So it gives you different options like XML to CSV, XML to JSON, and JSON to XML. And the one that you already see on the screen is CSV to XML. So these converters you can use at any point in time, but as I mentioned, within the message processing shapes, whatever are the standard shapes provided to us apart from scripting, we need to stick to XML because that is how the data is parsed within those shapes. It only expects XML inputs. So we can use them before, after scripts and things like those. So these are the standard converters provided. Then we have the encoder, which is the other part of the decoder. So we have different types of encodings that we discussed. So you can either encode the message, or otherwise, if you are receiving an encoded one, you can use the decoder to decode it. Then we also have the message digest. Again, I've never used it, but it has a few of the algorithms to digest the message. And I'm not sure, I've never used it. So in case if anybody else has, please feel free to speak up, and you can, we all can know that what this digest algorithm is. Sorry. No one? Okay, so this is one of the shapes that I've never worked with, and I've never even used it in any of the proof of concepts as well. So never did we receive any of the requirement to have a message digest out of the message that we have. Okay. Then we have the scripting step, which is again a very important one, and it is used widely in HCI because many of the things which the standard shapes unlike Boomi, are able to give us a functionality. We usually code them into scripts. So a script, let me just quickly. So they give you with the different methods that are available for your scripting purposes. Something like you can use the method get body on the message, and this will give you the current body. Then you also have set the body, wherein you wish to, if you wish to change the body which is incoming with a different set of XML, then it gives you the mapping properties. These are the properties wherein you can get the headers, you can exchange the headers, you can set properties or get properties. So different set of properties, you can pass it on to .map and you can access them. These are the standard imports that are available. In case if there are any of the custom imports, you can create a library onto the left, wherein you have the tree structure. You can create a new folder as SRC main resources library, and you can put in your own jar files over there and your custom functionalities, and you can import them as required. So it gives you a full-fledged approach towards having other jar files to be imported, for which the functionalities can be used. Usually we import the SAX parser and the JDOM parser of Java, and also a few of the resources they have been using XML slurper as well, which is a very easy way of parsing the XML body, any XML string. So since in the content modifier, whenever we capture the body, we capture it as a string. So you need to reconvert it into an XML document to parse through it. So that way it's a lot more easier. Then these are a few of the dummy functions that they have given over here, that you can set the properties, set the messages, and at the end, you eventually return the message onto the calling shape so that it can proceed on to the next step. So if you're not returning anything over here, it throws an exception. I'm not sure why, but the message incoming, there has to be an outflow from the script as well, because it is under the message transformer. So it expects an output at the end of the script execution. Any questions on this part? A very widely used case of scripting is that we do the lookups using script. So like I was mentioning on the pick list, so this the lookup functionality as is provided in Boomi, the document cache concept, that is not available in HCI. So we just cache the incoming payload into one of the properties, and then we send it across to the script. We just parse it in the script and we do the lookups using our custom functionalities. So the pick list lookups, the foundation, generic objects, then any of the employee information that you would like to enrich. And the content enricher may not be a feasible solution at times due to performance constraints. So that is the time wherein we go ahead and make use of the scripting step. And we parse in our data. If you wish to do some complex validations, for example, I have used scripts in cases wherein we have the CSV data incoming, but it contains a header and a footer row. So when we convert it using the CSV to XML converter, currently it doesn't support the functionality of converting the header and the footer rows as well, or removing them. Ignore header, ignore footer. These kind of functionalities are not provided. So we use a script to remove the header and footer and then pass it on to CSV to XML converter. So that is one of the other use cases of script. Otherwise, you can even set properties into it. So for example, if you have a cost center coming in, the cost center is populated with, let's say, controlling area. It is concatenated with controlling area. And you wish to remove the first 4 characters as the controlling area and then pass it on to SAP for a better processing. Then those kind of manipulations or things you can do over here. Even as I mentioned that for each step, you can have a property set for a message. So you can have something like, based on the controlling area, if you want to bifurcate the messages and put it onto different SFTP servers, you can even do it in script, set a property as the controlling area, and then pass it along that route. These kind of things we can definitely do in scripts. And there are endless possibilities with scripting step. Any questions on this part? Well, it is going into a bit of a technical domain, so I'm still trying to find as many use cases as possible so that everyone is interested in this session. Okay, then moving on to the next, we have a filter. Now this filter acts as a filter based on the XPath expression that you can give. So you can filter the values based on, let's say you have an XML structure consisting of multiple nodes or recurring nodes of records, and you wish to pass only the records which are having the controlling area as, let's say, XYZ. So you can put in a filter over here, enter the XPath expression in this particular format. So something like so it will filter all the records which do not have a controlling area as XYZ, and it will pass it along. So this condition means that these are the records which are allowed ahead of filter. So you can code a condition like this, and it can even have multiple conditions. So you can have or control underscore area is not equal to something like this. So you can combine them with or and conditions, and you can leverage this filter shape to restrict the messages that you don't want to go forward. The catch with the filter shape is, which we found out the hard way, is that whenever you have a complex XML structure, something like record set / records / the linear structure, and you are checking on any of the conditions, it removes the root node from the messages. So that is one of the constraints that we have seen whenever we make use of the value type as node list. I've never used any of the other values. Maybe for node, it won't have this kind of an effect. But usually we go ahead with node list because there are multiple messages within that particular XML message. So you have multiple XML nodes which you wish to filter upon. And that is why we make use of node list. Okay. Then we have message persistence. As the name suggests, this means that you need to persist a message or any of the values from the message. So you have different options like writing variables. So whenever you have write variables, it updates or writes the values into a data store. Now this data store is common to all the iflows. So if you have written a variable like p_var1, whatever value you are writing in this, you can define the scope, whether it is global or it is not global. So it can be made available to other processes as well. So this acts as the SAP memory in a BAP, wherein you can exchange properties or values within processes. So let's say if you have a sequential run. So in the first, when the first process runs, maybe you can store the employees which were picked by the first process. The second process can refer this variable store, data store, and it can capture all the values, and it can just select only those set of employees. So this can act for that particular business case. It is as good as like you're persisting the properties in Boomi, wherein we have the dynamic process properties or the process properties which we persist. So we can make use of the right variable shape. Then you also have data store operations. As I mentioned earlier, that data store can be used either within the process, or the XML part can be made available to the outside process. So like, for example, you have a visibility over here. You can have integration flow, or you can have it global visibility. So other flows also can come and look into this data store. Now, this data store is not common. You need to specially specify the names over here. So a new data store would be created for you once any of the entries are ready to be written. You can either supply an entry ID, otherwise a generated GUID would be assigned to that particular entry, whichever you are writing. Then you have retention threshold in case if you'd like to run a job, which I'm not sure has been provided by SAP already. But if you would like to run a job to clean up the data stores, so then you can provide a retention day and time, and similarly expiration. So after the number of days has passed, it will simply show up in your data store as overdue, that this entry has been quite overdue and you wish to take an action. If you would like to take an action against it, it should be fine. And after 90 days, it would get expired and it would be deleted automatically from your system. Okay. And then you can have whether you wish to encrypt the stored message, or you wish to, in case if the entry ID already exists, then would you like to override the existing message? So if there is already an entry with the same ID, you can overwrite it. Otherwise, you can just simply leave it blank. Now, this was the part of writing it. In case if you wish to read any of the data store entries, simply right click on it and you can switch to either get, select, delete. Difference between get and select is get will always give you one entry, and select is for selecting multiple. And then delete is in case if you wish to delete the integration flow for specific entry, delete the data store in the integration flow for a specific entry ID, or else all the entries. If you're not specifying anything, it will delete all the entries. Any questions on data store write variables?
Aditya, just a quick one. For the data store, where's the physical location for the storage? You know, can it be on your system, or it's going to be on the tenant? Maybe some directories on the tenant.
Yep, it is the data store operations. They are on some directories on the tenant itself. Okay. So that is the reason we have an option of making it global with global visibility, so that it can be accessed by other iFlows as well.
No. What I'm saying is, I'm just looking at maybe an additional use case for it. Because I've seen you use it before. Where you access the file that is generated from the storage. Okay, on your own local PC. And I'm wondering if we can specify some other systems that we can access, via the network as a storage location for the data store.
Well, that.
Or maybe that's another. Maybe that's
for that time. Yes, Pakao, but for that also you need to have some kind of a process to pick up the file and write it to a data store. Because this data store is available on the tenant itself. Let's say, for example, if I have file local and I would like somebody to access it, or any of the processes to access it, you do not have a disk connector as of now. You cannot connect to your local directories. You can only connect to SFTP servers. So in that case, yes, you would like to definitely take it and dump it onto a data store and ask all the other processes to have the source data from that particular data store and execute.
Interesting.
And then we have the last shape over here as persist message. It's a very small shape. It is used to persist the message at any given step in your iFlow. So let's say for notification purposes, if you would like to see that what is the current value that my process has brought up till this point in time before the end event 3. So you can put in a persist shape over there, and it will write that entry onto a data store. Now, I'm not sure why this is provided, because we can always put in a write shape over here, but it stores in a common data store which can be accessed by all the different iFlows. So it is global to all of them, and you can mention different step IDs over there. So the message payload is stored in the message data store or message store, and it will persist the message for us to be notified. Again, I've never used this shape, so I'm not sure how it works exactly, but this is what has been told by SAP, that it is used to persist the messages. So I would believe that it is another notify kind of a shape that we thought might be helpful. Notify could come over here. And then the last tab in the palette is the message routing, in which we have multicast. So multicast, as the name suggests, a single message would be distributed as a copy of messages through different routes. It can either be sequential or it can be parallel. All the branches can execute in parallel, or it can be sequential. So when you, when you pull it the first time, it is by default as set to parallel multicast. You can right click and you can switch it to a sequential multicast. So it will give you the sequence order and the sequence name. You can define different names. It is same as the branch shape in Boomi, wherein you can have multiple branches coming out of one single place, and the same payload is distributed across all the branches. Okay. Next shape is the splitter shape. Splitter splits the incoming XML message into different messages. We have different types of splitter like IDOC or signatured content, in case if you would like to split that. Then you have iterating and general. General is the one that we always use. So in case if you wish to split your records that XML, XPath has records, you can mention that. You can split it into groups, like you can divide the full payload into multiple groups or maybe for parallel processing purposes or things like those. So you can specify the group size. Either it can be 24 records in a group or 500 records in a group. Usually we keep it blank. If it is blank, it will split by each. And then the timeout. In case if the splitter doesn't get a response, basically, that, how do I say? A splitter needs to either, the message either needs to reach at an end event or else at a gather shape. So if the flow of the message is not completed within a stipulated amount of time, then it can fail that particular message and move on with the next splitted message. So that we can specify, though there's no possible use case for it. But in case if you feel that, like Bakao, you mentioned that we may have infinite loop or looping kind of a scenario wherein it might turn into an infinite loop. So in those kind of cases, we can specify a timeout at splitter level. So if a message by mistake has entered into an infinite loop, we can just fail it and move on with the next message. So we have three different options over here. streaming, parallel processing, and stop on exception. In case if there is any exception within this splitter till end message or splitter till gather, it should stop on an exception or not. And also the messages should be sent in parallel or not, and should they be streaming messages or not. Streaming is as good as sequential. So once the processing of the first one is completed, then only the second one would be sent to be processed. This is primarily used in cases wherein you have, let's say you have a property set at a particular point in an iFlow, and you are using the same property in a map later on. So you don't want the second message to come up and mess up that property. So that is where you basically use the streaming. Otherwise, if you're sure that none of the properties or none of the concurrent execution of the messages would fail your business scenario, then you can go ahead and use the parallel processing on the splitter. Any questions on this? No. Okay.
Yeah, Aditya. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I had some questions, but I am not able to stick it out. I have some confusion between the message transformation part. Can you just expand that?
Okay.
Yeah. So number one is content modifier, and then we have operations as well, right? Message operations, data operations. There are two shapes.
Data store. Data store.
Data store operations. Yeah. So if I understand it correctly, data store operations is something where is a place where we can transform the extracted data. Is that true? I mean, if there's a set of records of 100 employees coming into the system, and I want to filter out the employees whose wage are like between 35 to 40 years. Can I do it using data store? With the filters and the data store operations?
No, Rajdeep. Actually, data store is only for in case if you would like to store the message somewhere, so that you can utilize it in the next branch steps, or else you can utilize it in another process altogether, another iFlow. So you can just store the data into the tenant database.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Rajdeep, I'm able to hear you. Are you able to hear me? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
Rajdeep.
I lost you. I'm very sorry. I lost you.
Okay. So what I was mentioning is that data store is used to store the data into tenant level database, so that it can be made available to either the same iFlow at a later point in time, or else it can be made available to, let's say, another iFlow for any kind of data exchange purposes.
Okay.
So data store is available for that particular thing.
Okay. And then if we talk about my customer requirement, I want to filter out the records of for the employees between the age of 35 to 40. So I'll have to use filter there, is it?
Absolutely. So you can make use of filter, you can do your custom scripting, and you can also make use of route shape.
Route shape, yeah, that's true.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So data store operations only meant to store the messages in any point of time. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Absolutely. Sure. Okay. So moving on, we have the next shape as aggregator. Aggregator is another shape which is used to combine or aggregate the messages together, and it should always have an XPath expression which gives a condition to aggregate them. So it is as good as an enricher. So it gives you the incoming format. Usually it has to be XML of the same format, and you can either combine in sequence or combine at XPath. And you need to specify a condition, and you can even mention the data store name for aggregating all the messages into a data store. You can combine it in a sequence wherein you have a message sequence condition and how to identify the last message in that particular sequence. Or otherwise, you can just simply make use of combine and just give the last message condition, wherein how to identify that this is the place up till when I need to combine the messages. And it just, you can mention the completion timeout, and you can aggregate into one of the data stores. And you can have the correlation expression, wherein which element should be used for correlating the messages, like joining at node kind of thing. Again, this we very rarely use because aggregation is something, instead of that, we make use of gather, which we'll cover later. Then we have the router shape. As I mentioned earlier, the router shape provides you with conditional routing, and it has different routes that you can configure based on the expression type as XML or non-XML. The non-XML expressions are the regex expressions that we have. So it does support them in cases of non-XML. And you can also have the property values over here. Something like you can check whether the property on that particular message is according to our needs or not. So like P control area is not equal to XYZ. So you can have conditional routing based on non-XML as well. And then apart from router, we have join and gather. So join does nothing but whichever, in case if you have multiple branches converging at one point in time, so you can make use of join. And okay, doesn't allow me. So you can have multiple branches as input to join, and you can specify that how these, I mean, where these needs to go. So the properties of join are none, because if you have seen, I mean, PI people would be able to relate to it. If you have multiple messages as an inflow or as an outflow from PI, it usually creates a root node as messages, and then it will combine the messages in message 1, message 2, message 3, and so on format. So even in mapping, sometimes we make use of multi-part messages. So even the join works on the same principle. Whichever are the incoming messages, it doesn't care about the format of the messages, like, I'm sorry, the XML format of the messages. It just combines them and puts them under different root nodes. Like messages, then you have message 1, and you can have the first branch's incoming payload, then message 2, second branch, and so on. So it gives you that multi-map messages kind of a stream coming out from here, from join. So this we usually use whenever you have splitter. As I mentioned, a splitter needs to end at an end message, or else it needs to end at gather. So whenever you are using a splitter and gather kind of a combination, you cannot have any conditional routing in between. SAP HCI iFlow design does not allow that. So if you're having a conditional routing in between, the only way to gather the messages would be to use join and then gather them. So that could be the only possible way that you can actually combine the messages or gather them at a point wherein you can create a file out of it, or you can put it under processing later on. Another use case for this kind of a functionality, let's say you have a file-to-file scenario wherein you are receiving a CSV file, and you need to validate a few of the columns and enrich the data from success factors. And you need to write another file with the incoming set of data enriched with success factors data. So there could be conditional routing within your iFlow that in case if any success factors call has failed, so you need to notify it. Then also, in case if the incoming file had a value which is not present in success factors, hence you are unable to enrich it, so you need to notify that as well. But at the same time, you need to connect all the records and then gather them and then create an output file. So in those kind of scenarios, when you have conditional routing unavoidable, we go ahead and make use of join. And just after join, we may have an XSLT to remove the root nodes, as I was mentioning earlier, that we have a use case for XSLT wherein it is used to remove the root nodes. So we remove those nodes and then we gather them at the X path. And the last shape is gather itself. So gather can work on different formats. It can be plain text, it can be different formats or same format. Then you can use the algorithm as simply combine them. So it will again combine the messages and add the multi-map messages, root tags like join on top of them. Otherwise, you can combine them at XPath. So you can have this combination from source XPath as record set / records. So you can combine them at this particular XPath. In case if you wish to rename the target, you can have them as combine a target. So you can change the, but we very rarely use that. We only use the combine from source XPath in case if it is the same format. If it is different format, there is only one option left, which is to combine them directly. And if it is a plain text, again, you can concatenate it only. So you don't have any delimiter for concatenation as well. So you need to ensure that the plain text is coming with the delimiter so that you can identify the multiple records that are coming in. Okay, so that finishes at least our all the palette related stuff. So any questions on any one of these, any of the functionalities that you feel is not sufficed by the shapes that we already discussed? Any of the use cases you might to bring up? Nothing? Okay, so I'll move on. So the next part in our agenda is to have sample project directories. We have already created that. Value mapping. Value mapping is something that I would definitely like to cover. So value mapping is again created like an integration project, because as you know, in people who have experience with PI, you know that it is deployed as a different or let's say a standalone entity in your PI server. It is never a part of any of the configuration scenarios as such. So you just define value mappings based on the contexts. So over here as well, we have a similar concept. So instead of integration flow, we select value mapping and VM underscore training. And it gives you a very small XML kind of a structure. That's it. That is how you define a value mapping. That's it. So you just give your contexts. The structure of this XML is the source context and the target context. Everything is provided in the SAP help documents. I have personally never used value mapping because there was none of the scenario which requires us to have a value mapping created which can be used across iFlows. They were very specific to a particular iFlow, and that is why the value mappings have never been deployed by me personally. But it's a very simple kind of a structure. They give you the, if you copy just even one value from there, it gives you a fair idea on how the value mapping in HCI works. So it is as good as the way it is stored in PI in the backend, but in the front end, it gives you a nice column view of where you can enter the source and the target. But here we do not have any kind of editor as of now available for this. So it just creates a new one. And here, once you have saved it, you can just directly load it onto your web UI. And from web UI, you can, under the configure option, you have the deploy option. You can deploy it from there. I'm not even sure in case if there is a way that we can deploy it from here, but I have only used the web UI to deploy it. So in order to deploy the value mapping, you upload it to web UI and then you deploy it. So that is the value mapping part. Very rarely do we use it because we also have, like in PI, we have fixed values available in the mapping part of HCI. So in case if you wish to do a simple lookup, you can always go ahead with fixed values table instead of value mapping, which is as good as cross-reference table available in, or I'm sorry, simple lookups available in Boomi. The value mapping can be compared to the cross-reference table lookup available in Boomi. So we can have cross-reference table lookup wherein we have a source and a target, and it can be used across the processes. Similarly, value mapping has been provided so that you can deploy it and it can be used across the processes. So fairly easy part. Okay, now, so do you have any questions, or should I just directly go ahead and create a sample integration flow, trying to incorporate as many shapes as possible?
I think you can create one, Aditya. That would
Yeah,
give us some more clarity.
So as I discussed, I'll just create a single point-to-point channel. The incoming part would be a SOAP-based receiver. So we'll expose a web service out of HCI, and the outgoing would be an email with the payload and with different properties set through content modifier and through scripting. So we can try that. Okay. So first of all, once you right click on the channel, it gives you different options, like you can copy it, you can configure the channel, you can save it as a template so that you can use it in your other shapes as well. And otherwise you can load an already saved template. So a name of channel is not mandatory, but usually we tend to give it. So
Aditya, a quick one while you are entering these values. Like you have selected that the input is of SOAP type. So in case it's OData, then the input can be anything, right? It can be JSON, can be anything. In that case, do we have to transform the input? Because this understands only XML, if I'm not wrong.
For the web service call, yes, you can have anything as the input, but as soon as it comes, like, so this works on the SOAP concept. So SOAP payload, the body payload can be any format.
Okay.
But as soon as you receive that body in your HCI environment, you need to convert it into XML so that you can process it with the rest of the shapes.
Using the shape that is available for conversion.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, the best part about creating web services in HCI is that you need not have a WSDL until unless you want to supply it to, let's say, a larger audience who might be interested in availing the services of this web service. So if you know that there is one particular system which is sending us an XML in a particular format, so you need not provide any URL to WSDL. So you need not have any web service definition language on your landscape or in your SOAP channel. Then service and endpoint are not required. Again, they are usually procured from the WSDL in case if you have any. The address is mandatory field because this is the address or the URI. It helps in creating the URI for your web service. There are two modes of web service. One is a standard and the other one is robust. So a standard web service, robust actually has some exception handling differences. I mean, I'm not sure exactly on what they are, but they have been listed in one of the documents that I was reading. And pretty much standard also works in the same way because we do almost all the exception handling and all the error handling within our iFlows itself. So we usually go ahead with the standard mode. but robust has, I think there is some timeout difference or something. Then you can select the web service security configuration. Either it can be none or it can be via manual configuration in the channel itself. So you can specify the different security checks that you wish to leave on the web service call. So currently we'll be going ahead with none. That is the primary method that we also use. Once you have selected the sender channel, created the sender channel, you need to also look at the sender, how it is trying to authenticate to the HCI system. As I mentioned yesterday, there can be two types of authentication. One is role-based, wherein you provide a user ID and password to access the web service. And the roles within the HCI cockpit would be the ones responsible for identifying whether the user has enough access to run the web service or not. Second one is the certificate-based authentication. So you can add another certificate, you can browse for it, you can add one of the certificates from your system, and that would be used for authenticating the caller. So, okay, in this case, since it is a web service, let's make it synchronous. I won't have any receiver. Let the reply go back through the web service itself instead of an email. Okay, and now I'll just make use of content modifier as of now. Okay, that is one. And then I would even save the property as a script. As the incoming payload as a property. So p_body. And then I will make use of a script to combine these two.
Aditya, Rajdeep here.
Yeah.
This
Yes.
reminded me of one point that while you were explaining scripts, we always have to return the message here, right?
Yes.
And this method, process data, is a default method by
Yes.
SAP HCI. Okay, so
Absolutely.
I see that the return type in the method is message. If
Yes.
you see the definition, so I think that's the reason we always have to return message. So in the definition, yeah, that's message. So that may be the reason it's always expecting a message, or else it will be there will be an issue while compilation. Or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That could be the reason. But usually it doesn't allow us to change the definition of this default message. So I've never tried scripting with maybe without message or anything. But yeah, by mistake, what I did was that in one of the scripts which I tried copying and leveraging, so I just deleted this return message.
Okay.
And that is when I found out that, okay, it throws an error.
Yeah. So this method has a return type. So maybe the reason we are not sure if that can be modified.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just
do this def final is equal to, usually since it is string, so I'll just put root final plus the body. Control. And as we know that we need to set a body at the end. So we need to set body as final. That's it. And it returns the message. So I'll just save it across. And the script goes on to end. So let's try and compile it. And maybe we can put a mapping later on. So this is the idea of console. As soon as you do any changes or anything onto, you save it or you try to execute checks, the console gives you the status of that. And then you can go ahead and deploy it onto the tenant. It reflects the same tenant to which you have connected as of now, operations server. Not sure whether he has SOAP UI. Not available. At times, HCI could be unpredictable. It gives you different kinds of error. Now, once it has been deployed, you can double click on the tenant name. It gives you the same screen that we see from web UI, wherein you can do the message monitoring, you can check the deployed artifacts, and you can check the data store viewer. So any of the data stores that you might be writing the entries onto, and plus the visibility that they have. And you have the deployed artifacts. So here you can just quickly go ahead and confirm whether you have anything as POC. No, nothing. And since it is a web service deployment, so it should show up the web service over here. So if you see, it has the sample one training as, oh, I'm sorry, it was sample one. So you can copy the endpoint URL from here. This is the endpoint URL as we discussed yesterday. Up till CXF, it is a constant based on the tenant. And after that, you have whatever is the address that you provide in the web service. So I'll just, since we do not have SOAP UI, I think on this laptop.
So Aditya?
Yes, Pakal.
Yeah, the question I have is with this standard adapter, so this URL, you can actually give it to any sender system to call you. Hello?
Yes, you can give it to any of the sender systems to call.
Just any client, you know, whatsoever, you know, can consume the WSO file and, you know, send messages to you, right?
I'm sorry, Bakao, I didn't get that. I mean, I
was saying that, you know, you showed us just now where, you know, where the endpoint URL for the sender channel. I'm saying that you can actually give that to any sender.
Yes.
To call you.
Absolutely.
irrespective of whether the sender is a cloud-based client or is just an on-premise client, you know. But as long as the address is reachable, they can always send messages to you.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, this is the one. We have post and so let's try it up. Before that, I'll just quickly gather the credentials. Oh, sorry about that. I accidentally clicked on. Oh, it is unable to ping. Oh. I hope I gave it correct.
I think you need to put authentication on something.
Yeah, it is role-based authentication, so I don't think so. It should require a server. Actually, it's pretty easy in SOAP UI, but
Yeah.
System. I mean, this is the way we usually use to test all our web services in HCI. So I'm not sure whether the advanced test client would be able to work on that. It does form. I'll have to base 64 encode it in that case. Well, better yet would be if I quickly download it.
Yeah, I think you just need to quickly download SOAP UI.
Any idea, Bakao, on which one? It would be open source, right? Oh dear, it would take a lot of time. HTTP doesn't work. Well, this might be quite some time before we do it. So, Agni and Raidu, would it be okay if you can just give me like 5 minutes? I'll log in through a different laptop. I have
Sure.
SoapUI in that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll quickly do that. I'll keep myself on mute till that time.
No problem, Aditya.
Hello. Hello. You able to hear me?
Yes, Aditya.
Okay. Okay. So I will just try and create a new project. What did I do? Oops. Just a moment. I'm just trying to get the ID from Eclipse. And it's stuck. Actual map HCI EU1 HANA on demand.com. Let's see, it's my test. Yes. Oops. Okay, so here it says that there is some failure on HCI. So I'll just quickly check that. I'll just stop the screen share.
Aditya,
Yes. Yes, Agni.
hey Aditya.
Yes, Agni.
Yeah, so it's already 10 o'clock Central Time, so just wanted to.
Okay, so I mean, this is the basic idea. So we do have the web service call. I think there is some issue with the script. So that I can easily check. But
So, did we cover all the topics of today's agenda? The day two?
for today's agenda, yep, we just were left with importing content from SAP PI. Now, actually, for that, we need to have a PI server in the landscape. And also the connectivity needs to be configured for that. So the basic, I mean, this is the only point left as of today.
And yesterday, I think we did the monitoring traces, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Monitoring and traces, actually, I was planning on covering after this, because once we have the execution of the iFlow, so this is a very good example of monitoring, like we have a failure over here already, and how the message payload looks, message processing log, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think what we should do, I think, let's end the session here.
Okay.
And continue tomorrow. Because I
Sure.
see there are 3 people left because of the problem might be the timings.
Yep.
So for them it will be an advantage once they join tomorrow.
Okay, sure. So for tomorrow, Raidu, we discussed actually.
Yeah. So tomorrow, because Aditya has some training scheduled for himself from the SAP Tech Ed, so he will not be available at the 6:30 to 8:30 timings. By the time he reaches home, it will be about 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. India time. So we would like to schedule this call at 8:30 p.m. IST. Is there any concern for any of the people on the call?
So it's just a 2 hours shift. Like instead of 6:30, we start at 8:30.
Yeah. So whoever has some planned meeting during that time, I would sincerely request to reschedule them, either prepone or postpone. If it is possible. I know you guys, a lot of people are working on the client sites. I would request you to either cancel them or reschedule them at your convenience. So we will go ahead and reschedule these meetings for the entire week from 8:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. If there is any change, I mean, we will look at tomorrow because I don't know how much time it will take for Aditya to come back due to the traffic. So we'll look at tomorrow and we will discuss on the timings again. But tomorrow onwards, I would anticipate these trainings will be at 8:30 p.m. IST. Agni will send out the rescheduled invitation for everyone.
Yeah, I'll shoot and send update after we are done with this meeting.
So Aditya, tomorrow we will have at 8:30 p.m. IST.
Okay, thanks a lot, Raidu. Thanks for the consideration, and sorry all for the trouble. Actually, I mean this I didn't get an approval till yesterday, so that is the reason for the last minute notice on this reschedule.
No, thank you, Aditya. You've been a great assistance for all of us.
Sure, Raidu. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Pakao.
Thank you, Aditya.
Sure, Deepika, thank you. And in case if anybody would like to look at the process now or would like to call this the web service, so Raidu, I can send across the source to you, and anybody if they would like to try the web service, it is working now, so that has been resolved.
Okay, can you just paste it on the chat window?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, you can just paste it on the chat window, like to everyone.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Like that. Sure. I'll do that. Just a moment. There is actually one of the XML namespace that I would like to remove.
Aditya, Deepika here.
Yes, Deepika.
In your any of your earlier projects, did you have PI in the landscape that you worked on?
Yes. I mean, with HCI or
with HCI? With HCI, we were talking about importing content from PI if it is in the landscape.
Yep.
So at least if you cannot show the current system, probably you can just give some screenshots on how to import it, because many people are there from the PI team in this training. It would be helpful for them to, if it's possible, to just get the screenshots, not the I don't want you to show your live system, because that's again your client's things.
I do understand, Deepika, but the thing is that now I do not have access to that system. I mean, I've switched projects. So, and that was also like one of the demo scenarios that we did, wherein only the mapping content and the XSD templates you can import from PI. There are very less things that you can do with PI. So we just imported the mapping content and the XSD definitions. That was it. Nothing else.
Okay.
Chad has left already. Okay.
No, Aditya?
Yes, Pakao?
Yeah, can you put the URL itself as well? Out of just a XML payload. The URL. Because if you need a configure.
Okay, the URL. Okay. Sure. I'll do that.
And before we end the session, just wanted to ask everybody, anybody has any questions, any inputs, or anything, please do come up. We have a couple of minutes before we
Okay, yeah. My question is to, I mean, this is just an internal statistics question, to Deepika, I mean, for some of us that are curious to actually progress from this point forward, can we do some test scenarios from, using this tenant? I mean, hello, Deepika?
Yes, Bagav. I'm just looking, just thinking about that.
Yeah, I don't know what the policy, what the policy.
Right.
What the policy
Let me check with Raidu and get back to you. Because if we need to provide, the whole team, it would be good if we can provide. So let me check, discuss with Raidu and get back to you on that.
Okay, that's fine, because the difficulty about this thing is if you just, saying it without you, getting your hands dirty, then before you know it.
Right. Bagav, thanks a lot.
Okay, sorry. So, Agni, we'll catch up later.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, Aditya, are we done for today?
Yes, Agni, sure. Maybe tomorrow I can cover up the message monitoring and the debugging parts.
Sure. Okay. So I'll send a meeting update with the new time, 8:30 p.m. IST, which is 11 o'clock Central and 12 noon Eastern time.
Sure.
Thank you, Aditya.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aditya.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.